What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is my team selection for Game Week 2. So I'm going to take you through how the team is looking, talk through the transfer that I've already made and why I made it early, and just generally a look at future weeks, captaincy, and all that good stuff. And before all that, I'll quickly run you through how I did in Game Week 1. So if you enjoy it, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to get your team rated for free over on Fantasy Football Hub, just click that link in the description below. All right, let's start with how I did in Game Week 1, and it wasn't great. I finished on 57 points, which gave me an overall rank of 4.4 million, which I'm pretty sure is my worst start over the last kind of 4 to 5 seasons. So not ideal, but I'll say what I would have said if I'd done well. Things change very quickly at the start of the season. Overall ranks are quite volatile, so it could flip in Game Week 2 just as easily as it went badly in Game Week 1. So I'm certainly not panicking yet. I think it's also a sign of the FPL pricing, because there were so many different ways to set your team up. We are going to see swings like this. So anyone that went either big at the back and or with Salah squads have done really well. Those of us that went with Haaland probably less so. Obviously, there's little details in there as well. Like you might have Jota instead of Fernandes. I've got Saka instead of your Son. It's not just about big at the back and Salah, but they seem to be, on average, the two things that made people do really well in Game Week 1. So hopefully the players I've got will do well in Game Week 2, and we'll talk about how I'm set up in a second. In goal, it was Henderson for Crystal Palace. I think that was a perfectly good pick. I could have gone for Flecken instead. He blanked as well. Henderson's got a better fixture in Game Week 2. Porro scored. Trent got a clean sheet and 2 bonus. I think the one big mistake I made was picking Quansah and Barco. And I went back and watched my deadline stream. With 5 minutes to go, I had Robinson instead of Quansah. I transferred Quansah in, and I said something like, I can't go for him and Barco. It's too much of a risk. And then by the time the deadline came around, I had both in my team. Now, I think there's a little bit of, a luck element here, because Quansah did start. So essentially, we've picked a 4.5 million starting Liverpool defender, which in another season would be amazing. But then he got hooked at half-time. And I knew that he would probably lose his place at some point or be on the bench. I didn't expect him to get hooked so early. So it does feel a bit unlucky. But also, it was definitely a mistake to go for 2 risks in defence that I knew long-term would have a good chance of not playing regularly. So I'm annoyed at myself for that. But I think outside of that, there's not a huge amount of problems in this team. Like, I went for Bruno Fernandes. I felt like I kind of forced him in, because when I put him in, I had to go from Smith Rowe to Rodgers on the bench, and it meant I couldn't have another 4.5 million defender instead of Barco. I just couldn't talk myself into going for Jota because of his long-term minutes, and that now looks like a mistake. We'll see how it plays out over the next few weeks, but that's why I forced Fernandes in. Like Gordon, there was a part of me that thought, will he definitely start? Even though it was quite likely, I just couldn't talk myself into going for another 7.5 or 6.5 million midfielder. In hindsight, I wish I'd just gone for my Garnacho draft, where I had him instead of Fernandes and Gabriel in defence, because I'd be absolutely laughing right now. But that's with hindsight. Garnacho didn't start, and we knew that, so I couldn't pick him. So it is what it is. Saka 12 points, and Nkunku went off, obviously, before the 60th minute for Man City. Against Man City. Eze should have had a goal. The referee literally told him after the game that it was a mistake to have ruled that out, so he should be on kind of 8+ points. Haaland scored against Chelsea, which was nice because that's one of his more difficult fixtures over the first 6 game weeks. Isak assists, but they played over 60 minutes of the game with 10 men. And João Pedro, look, picked him at 5.5. He hit the post. Brighton scored 3 goals in that game. I think the next fixture against Man United is pretty good as well. I don't think you can write most of these players off as terrible picks already. I know people always do that, right? Nkunku's never going to do anything. João Pedro is a terrible pick, but I look at that team and try and do it objectively, which is difficult because it's my team, so there's always going to be some bias there. I think Quansah and Barco was a mistake. I think João Pedro and Nkunku long-term might not be great options, but I certainly think it's too quick to write them off. And then I've got Rodgers, Barco and Quansah in particular, ready for Game Week 3 onwards on the bench. So overall, I think it's actually a decent enough squad, but I need Haaland to do really well this week in Game Week 2 because Salah's squads are already ahead. And it's not just the fact that Salah did really well in Game Week 1, it's that they were able to spend more money overall and just have a much better squad. And suddenly that looks really good. But there's no need to panic, because if Salah blanks this week and Haaland gets a hat-trick, suddenly things look really different. I'm not expecting Salah to blank, which is annoying, but something like that could massively swing it back into my favour. So Game Week 1, rubbish, really, compared to previous seasons. But it's not over yet. There's 37 game weeks to go. Let's talk about Game Week 2. So if you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you will have seen that I've already made a transfer in my defence. I got rid of Quansah before he dropped to 4.4 million, and I've put in Anthony Robinson instead. I said on Monday's video that if it looked like Quansah was going to drop in price, I was going to transfer him out, and that's exactly what I did. And essentially, I've used my first transfer of the season to put my team back to how it was 5 minutes before the Game Week 1 deadline, which is frustrating. It was a mistake. I couldn't be stubborn about it. I felt like I had to rectify it. And for my team, it felt like the right move to make. For other people, it's probably perfectly reasonable to keep hold of Quansah. But for me, I felt like I had to move him because I've got Barco on the bench, who's off on loan to Sevilla, so he's no longer an option. Quansah, no guarantee he starts in Game Week 2. And I accept that when we get to the press conferences on Friday, Slot might be really positive about him, and he may well be in people's predicted Liverpool lineups, but there's uncertainty there, right? So Barco not going to play. Quansah maybe not going to play. Konsa from Villa, okay, he's definitely going to be in the 11, but he's got Arsenal at home, so it's not a great fixture. Trent is fine against Brentford at home, but Porro was yellow flagged after the game against Leicester. Now, Porro might be absolutely fine, but that's not a guarantee. And I know people will be adamant that he's definitely going to play, and you might be right, but there was at least some risk there that he wouldn't. So I just felt like if Quansah dropped in price and then Ange ruled Porro out, I'm stuck with either having to sell Porro, which I might not want to do, or having to sell Quansah to a 4 million defender, and I definitely don't want to do that. So I looked at my team on Fantasy Football Hub. As always, links in the description. You want to get your team rated for free, you can do that. If you want to use the rest of the tools, 50% off, etc. And I'm looking at Trent against Brentford at home. Great. Quansah probably not going to start, so I would probably sub him out for Konsa. It's really annoying having to say their names in quick succession. And then Porro against Everton at home. But if Porro was ruled out, then I'm stuck with two defenders, and I couldn't put myself in that position. And that is why Robinson has come in for Quansah, and that move has already been made. And if you've watched my videos in the past, I'm really not against losing value on players that I think are good long term. But in this case, I felt like I just had to move. So worst case scenario now, Porro is fine, which I want him to be. I want him to play against Everton. And then instead of playing Konsa against Arsenal, I just play Robinson instead against Leicester. And that front three looks pretty good. And if Porro is ruled out, okay, that's annoying. I can just play Konsa. So either way, I should have three defenders for Game Week 2. And then in Game Week 3, I've got Robinson against Ipswich away if I want to play him. And if I don't want to play one of Porro or Trent, which I probably would because they're so attacking, I've got cover on the bench with Konsa against Leicester away. I'm not worried about Barco. He's just a 4 million defender. But I just felt like I had to bring in someone with more certain minutes. And Robinson's fairly attacking as well. And even after the Ipswich game in Game Week 3, he's got West Ham at home, Game Week 4, and Newcastle at home in 5, which are going to be more difficult for clean sheets. I don't particularly rate the Fulham defence, but at least it gives me cover now, as well as for this week. So for my team, I really think it was the right move. Even if Quansah starts on Sunday, I still think that was the right move to make. And it might work out badly. That can happen in FPL. But I'm kind of at peace with the fact I've done it. I love rolling in Game Week 2, get an extra week's worth of information, 2 transfers going into 3. You can do more interesting things, but that's why I made the move. So Trent against Brentford at home, Robinson against Leicester at home, and Porro against Everton at home is my defence. If Porro's ruled out, I probably won't take a hit to remove him unless it's really long term. I'll just play Konsa instead. And I know Porro's fixtures after Everton aren't great. Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. But after that, it's Brentford home. I wasn't really in a rush to get rid of him. If I had 0.5 million in the bank, I would have let Quansah drop, I think. Because then, if Porro was ruled out, I could have changed into a 6 million defender, but I didn't. So it just, I don't know, it made sense for my team. For yours, if you kept Quansah, it's probably fine. I wouldn't worry about it. And then Henderson in goal against West Ham at home, because on the bench I've got a 4 million goalkeeper that's not going to play. So I think that looks good. I just wish it hadn't taken a transfer to get to this point. So with my midfield, I think it looks pretty good on paper, but whether or not that would translate to FPL points remains to be seen, because 3 of the 4 blanked in Game Week 1. I've got Eze against West Ham at home, Bruno Fernandes against Brighton away, Saka against Villa away, and then Nkunku against Wolves away, with Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa on the bench, and they've got Arsenal at home. It was quite encouraging that he got 90 minutes in Game Week 1. I think those minutes will go down the further we get into the season, but it's still a good sign early on. I don't want to play him this week, but from Game Week 3 onwards, the Aston Villa fixtures are pretty good. So he could maybe be relied upon if I do pick up a slight injury with one of my attackers. We'll start with the easy midfielders first. Saka going absolutely nowhere. He's already outscoring both Son and Palmer. I think all three are good options. But I just love Saka. I think he's an incredible player. He's only getting better. And I also think he's a nice hedge on early versus late wildcard, because I think outside of the Man City away game, Arsenal's fixtures for an attacker are pretty good right up until game week 8. So he's going nowhere, right? He's staying in the team. Same with Eze. Now, there was speculation before the game week 1 deadline that he might leave Crystal Palace, but news came out, I think it was just before the deadline, but I didn't see it until afterwards, that the release clause in his contract expired. Now, it doesn't mean that someone won't come in with a big offer, but you've got to think that if you were going to buy him, you would have been aware of that, so you would have made the bid before the clause expired. It might be that, Man City just come in with a massive bid before the end of the transfer window, but it feels more sure that he's going to stay. And I know he blanked in game week 1, but he should have had that free kick goal, as I've said many times. And there were other parts of that game where he could have got returns on another day. He likes to shoot. He's on direct free kicks. He takes penalties as well. I think he's a really good option, and they got good fixtures coming up, so he's staying as well. Fernandes, I think he's fine as an FPL pick. He's another one that could have had returns in game week 1. I know we can do this with every single player, right? There'll be people that have had returns from players that think they should have had more. I get that. But he had 2 really good chances. On another day, he walks away with at least 1 return, and the fixtures are okay. The problem is, I knew if I put him in my team and he blanked in game week 1 and then I saw Brighton away and Liverpool at home, I wouldn't be particularly happy. And I also knew that he's going to be one of the players that I'm always looking to downgrade. Like, I'm already thinking if I had Jota or Gordon instead, I'd have another million to put elsewhere in this squad, and that would probably be better. But the fact that I've already moved Robinson on means even when I get to game week 3, I'm only going to have 1 transfer, so I'm not going to have the moves to redistribute those funds. So I've just got to accept that I'm keeping Fernandes for a couple more weeks. And I got in this position last year with Fernandes and Rashford, which is playing on my mind a little bit. But one of those chances goes in, and I'm not worried about him at all. So I don't think there's a need to panic, but I don't necessarily think he's a great option. I think he's just fine, and that's about it. So he's staying. Nkunku, it'll be interesting to see how many minutes he gets tonight, because Chelsea have got a Europa Conference League playoff game. He only played 58 minutes against Man City. Not great, but it was Man City, right? I'm not sure Maresca will set up like that again. I don't know if we'll see Nkunku on the left. I'm not as confident, but I'm still fairly certain he'll be in the 11 way more times than he's not. And I think he may still be nailed on for starts. Not for 90 minutes. I'm not sure I ever thought that. But I still think he'll pretty much be nailed on for starts. He's just too good. But Chelsea do have a lot of options, right? They've bought Neto. João Felix are there as well. Jackson, Palmer. The list goes on, right? I don't have another 20 minutes to list all of Chelsea's players. But I appreciate there is concerns about his minutes now. There has to be. And they're not going to take a risk with him, right? That's the key. When you've got that many players, squad depth, there's no point taking a risk with someone like Nkunku who missed so much of the season. But I'm not prepared to write him off as a pick. I'm just not. And it could be that he plays more central against Wolves and gets maybe 65, 70, 75 minutes. He gets a return. Suddenly the picture looks so much better. And I'm just not sure he's going to be benched at the moment. And obviously, for now, yes, they've got midweek games, right? This playoff game they're playing tonight. But if he doesn't start that's even more confidence that he's going to play on the weekend. If he does start and gets like 70 plus minutes, then I'm going to be really worried about a start against Wolves. And I may play Rodgers instead, but I don't think I would take a hit to remove him. Like, there's not another 6.5 million midfielder that I think is absolutely essential to bring in. Like, Mitoma obviously looks good. Garnacho's got a return off the bench. When he starts, he'll be a decent option. But there's no one I really want to move to. Maybe like Smith Rowe against Leicester at home, but it's not going to be worth a hit. So if Nkunku doesn't start tonight, great. He definitely plays against Wolves. Happy days. If he does and he gets a lot of minutes, there's maybe some worry there, but I've got Rodgers on the bench. So Nkunku might end up being a bad pick, but I'm not losing hope yet. And I think on another day, maybe he would have got a return against Man City. Maybe they would have found him a few more times. He took a couple of shots as well. It was a difficult game. We weren't really expecting anything in that fixture. This is where it really starts for Chelsea FPL options. And maybe he'll be terrible against Wolves and we can reassess next week. But there's no point in overreacting after 1 week, unless obviously something's going to happen, like you might only have 2 defenders. I think for my attackers, I'm kind of okay with them. So up front, I don't think Haaland against Ipswich at home really needs too much explanation. He's definitely going to be my captain. No need to second guess that. I don't think I'm going to triple captain him. I know some people are talking about that this week. I don't think it's a bad option if you want to use it in a single game week, but I'm going to go for that double game week dream instead. I accept that I might get into a position where there's only 2 double game weeks and I've got triple captain, bench boost, and whatever the mystery chip is going to be to play. But it also might be there's a great triple captain opportunity later on, and I don't want to miss that. It's worth saying, and again, if you've watched my channel for many years, you'll know this, I've never had a big score from triple captain in a double game week, so part of me thinks just use it in a single. He's fit, there's a week between games, we know he's going to start, it's a really great fixture, but I've got to save it, I think. So I'm just going to captain him, not triple. In terms of the bigger landscape picture of FPL, Salah squad's looking really good, and it's not necessarily that Salah is a better pick than Haaland, it's the 2.5 million and what that enables you elsewhere. And obviously Liverpool do have really good fixtures early on as well. So I am conscious of the fact that perhaps I've got it wrong by going Haaland, but again, it's 1 week. Like, it's no need to overreact. If I was wildcarding this week, would I go for a Salah squad instead? Probably, but I'd find it really difficult to wildcard Haaland out before he plays Ipswich at home. So I think it's worth being aware that perhaps there's a better way to set the squad up in the future. But again, no need to panic. Like, I look at this squad, what am I missing apart from Salah? Not really a huge amount. Jota is a good option. Maybe another premium defender instead of Robinson. But I really feel like it looks okay. And it could just be fine this week. But if I had to say right now, if I was going to wildcard early, like 4, 5 or 6, would I see myself going Salah or Haaland? Probably right now, Salah. But if he blanks in game week 2, Haaland gets that hat-trick, which I'm really hoping for, then all of a sudden the picture looks different. So Salah squads, you're doing well so far. Hopefully we can catch you soon. Isak, frustrating obviously that he blanked against Southampton at home because that was the best fixture Newcastle had first 6 weeks. But they were down to 10 men for so long. I'm not really that worried. He's going to start again. He's going to get good minutes. Bournemouth away is a decent enough fixture, so he definitely stays. I saw a comment on, I think it was a video yesterday saying that Isak just wasn't a good pick, and like that's how much people knee-jerk after 1 week. Like Isak is just a good pick, right? There's definitely ways you can set up without him, but I think he's fine moving forward, right? Bournemouth away, let's give him at least 1 more week, and hopefully Newcastle will have 11 players. And then I'm playing João Pedro against Man United at home, which may or may not be a good fixture. I think Man United defended pretty well against Fulham, but they were so bad last year, I'm not ready to accept that they're a good defence now. And Brighton are a good attacking team, and they're at home. And João Pedro will almost certainly play, or start, I should say, and he should be on penalties as well. They've signed Rutter. That could be a problem. It might be that João Pedro and Rutter share minutes, but it could also be that they both play and Welbeck drops out, right? That is possibility too. So again, João Pedro long term, a bit like Nkunku, might not be a good pick, but I can't say that for certain after 1 week. You know, he hit the post in the first game. Maybe he goes and gets a return in this one, and he's probably going to be benched in game week 3 anyway against Arsenal away. If everyone else is fit and available and going to start, then I probably won't even play João Pedro in 3. And if he's looking good, you've then got those 2 good home fixtures for Brighton in game weeks 4 and 5, which I believe are Ipswich at home and Forest at home. Yes, they are. So I still think he could be a nice, good value player. But again, looking ahead to possible wildcards and changing the structure of the team, there's now a lot of good 6 million forwards as well. Evan Nielsen for Bournemouth. Obviously, Muniz has got a good run of fixtures now. Chris Wood's already started off well. There's a lot of players at that price bracket that maybe it's worth spending that extra 0.5. But Southampton about to come into a good run of fixtures as well. Maybe Armstrong at Southampton for 5.5 could be a good option. There's plenty more information to gather over the next few weeks. And you might see me react initially at the weekends about stuff that's happening. But when I sit back and sleep on it, I'm usually a lot more calmer about what's to come. And I think overall this squad, this 11 at least, looks pretty good for game week 2. Could it look better? Maybe, but I'm happy with it. So Haaland captain, there we go. If you want to get your team rated for free, links in the description below. And if you want to use all the other tools on Fantasy Football Hub, there's 50% off. As always, those links will be in the description below for you to check out. I've said that twice now, so I'll just shut up on that. Give it a like, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, rate 5 stars if you listen on podcasts, and I will be back tomorrow for the final thoughts video.